Let's bring in Democratic Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland. Senator, thanks so much for your time. You, of course, were part of the bipartisan delegation in Munich this past weekend, right alongside the vice president. First, I'd like to get your reaction to the new sanctions by President Biden today. As we've reported, it appears that Putin is actively still moving troops into eastern Ukraine. Is it simply too late for sanctions at this point?
Well, Lindsay, it's good to be with you. No, it's not too late, and I support the actions President Biden took. It was really important that we impose sanctions, not just on these breakaway regions, but on Putin and Russia itself. And these are some very hard-hitting sanctions on one of the banks that essentially is the financier to the Kremlin, along with the bank that the Russian military uses. Plus the sanctions on sovereign debt. And of course, the German action with respect to Nord Stream 2 was very significant. So I think this is really important. And look, the administration is holding in reserve additional very tough punishing sanctions and making it clear that if Putin continues his aggression and continues this invasion, that he's going to get hit even harder.
And, Senator, this, of course, is a very complex geopolitical issue, but I'd like to ask you for a moment, just to simplify things a bit, why should one of your constituents in, say, Baltimore, care about what's happening thousands of miles away between Russia and Ukraine?
Well, I think there are a number of reasons. One, I think when you have a democratically elected government, as you have in Ukraine, that is subject to a violent attack by a bully, by a tyrant like Putin, all of us need to rally together to protect democracies. And other authoritarian leaders in the world are looking to see how the United States responds, how our allies respond, because if we don't help, increase the costs to Putin, they're likely to also take aggressive measures. I should also point out that the United States, along with other countries, convinced Ukraine years ago to give up its nuclear arsenal. And it will be very hard to get other countries that we're trying to persuade not to go in the direction of nuclear weapons to abandon those aspirations if we're not prepared to impose big costs on Russia at this time for what they're doing in Ukraine.
Just how concerned do you feel like Americans need to be about gas prices soaring and the stock market plummeting?
Well, there is a risk that gas prices will go up, but this is a moment where, if necessary, short-term pain is going to be important to sending a message to Putin and other authoritarian leaders that you cannot attack a democracy with impunity. If this goes without any counteraction by the United States and our allies, we can just expect more of the same from both Putin and others. And if that's the case, then the cost to Americans will be much higher in the future. So we are trying to design these sanctions in ways that minimizes the impact on Americans and our European allies and maximizes the impact on Putin and his regime. But there's no way to seal off entirely the United States and others from the fallout.
Understood. And President Putin has repeatedly violated written agreements, most recently the Minsk agreement. Appeasement clearly does not work with Putin at this point. If sanctions don't work, what other options do the U.S. and NATO have?
Well, first, we have to make it clear that there will be a very huge cost to pay. And the additional sanctions that are being contemplated will impose even more economic pain on Russia, including cutting Russia off from essential imports into Russia of things like semiconductors and other things that are essential to some of its industries. In that, we've got to make sure that we're acting in concert with our European allies and even our Asian allies, which is why President Biden has reached out to Japan, to Taiwan, to Singapore, because that economic pain can only be successful if we do it together. That was one of the major points that came out of our Munich discussions over the weekend. But Lindsay, beyond that, we should continue to supply the Ukrainians with weapons. And if Putin continues on with this invasion, he needs to know that the United States will supply the Ukrainian resistance with weapons and This is going to be a big long-term mistake for Vladimir Putin if he keeps going down this course, and we need to make sure that that's the case.
And I'm curious, because you say that we should supply Ukrainians with weapons. You, of course, serve on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. President Biden reiterated today that he is not sending troops into Ukraine no matter what Russia does. But in your estimation, is there a red line? Is there a moment in time where you feel that the U.S. would need to get involved with military force, with boots on the ground, actually physically in Ukraine?
I do not, Lindsay, think that we should be putting U.S. forces on the Ukrainian territory. But as we did after the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan, in that case, we provided the Mujahideen with Stinger missiles, and ultimately that drove the Russians out. And I don't think it's sustainable for Vladimir Putin to think that he can occupy Ukraine on a permanent basis against the will of the Ukrainian people, and we need to be on the side of the Ukrainian people.
Senator Chris Van Hollen, we thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
Good to be with you. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.